mtakatifu, kiongozi amini, utushike mkono, tulio wasafiri.
Okay, welcome back, brothers and sisters. Let us begin with a silent hymn. Amen. Okay, so if we go to the notes and go under the heading Little Time of Peace, we're going to cover this topic and bring it in line with our structure and these books of Daniel and Revelation. Is everybody there? Little Time of Peace. Just look at the heading. It's about 2/3 of the way down. Okay, and this first quote from 1 Thessalonians 2:68. It says, I was shown the inhabitants of the earth in the utmost confusion. War, bloodshed, privation, want, famine, and pestilence were abroad in the land. Where's that language taken from? Matthew 24, right? So what's it speaking about? The shaking of the angry nations, right? As these things surrounded God's people, they began to press together and to cast aside their little difficulties. So it's God's purpose that He brings us into this time of trouble to do what? Yes, I mean, according to this, they press together, but what's His main purpose of the time of trouble? What's the time of trouble purpose to do? Yeah, to purge us, right? Yes. Christ was made perfect through suffering, right? It says, as these things surrounded God's people, they began to press together and to cast aside their little difficulties. Self-dignity no longer controlled them. So what's removed? Self, right? Deep humility took its place. Amen? Amen. That's what we need to have. Suffering, perplexity, and privation caused reason to resume its throne, and the passionate and unreasonable man became sane and acted with discretion and wisdom. So God is not an unjust God, right? He brings these things upon us so that He can save us, right? Because if He leaves us in this slothful prosperity, then we would just be lost, right? Next paragraph. My attention was then called from the scene. There seemed to be a little time of peace. Once more the inhabitants of the earth were presented before me, and again everything was in the utmost confusion. Strife, war, and bloodshed, with famine and pestilence raged everywhere. Other nations were engaged in this war and confusion. War caused famine, want and bloodshed caused pestilence. And then men's hearts failed them for fear and looking after those things which are coming on the earth. And that's taken from Luke 21. Right? Yes. So what we see here is 2 times of trouble, right? And in between a time of peace. But as we can see, that this is an illustration from the beginning of Matthew 24 down to or Luke 21 down to the end, right? So therefore, what is it illustrated? Okay, I'll remind you, right? Christ is standing here on the Mount of Olives and He's telling them what's about to come. The Sunday law is about to come here, right? And it's going to take you all the way to the end, right? Okay, but this part is superimposed on here, right? So what is this an illustration of then? Come on, guys, that's not a difficult question, right? 1 plus 1 equals what? Right, so this, when you take this and you put it on here, how much of Matthew 24 do you have there? All of it. Right, so there's my question. What is this an illustration of? It's an illustration of Matthew 24, right? So it's an illustration of the Sunday law. Right? Okay. God shows repeating patterns, right? Okay, so let's go to the big pattern. What do we have? We have the time of trouble, followed by time of peace, followed by time of trouble, followed by time of peace, followed by time of trouble, right? Remember? Okay, so, but I just want to deal with this, right? You have these two Sunday laws, because this is Millerite history, prefigured, right? First of all, you have 1798 to 1840. Then you had 1844, April 19th to October 22nd, 1844. 2 times of trouble, right, being prefigured. Yes? In between the time of peace. So, what I want to show you, right, is one of those times of trouble is a Sunday law. So, one of those times of trouble is represented by this quote here. So, what's in the middle of the Sunday law? A time of peace, right? Everybody following, or am I making this difficult? Right? So we take this Sunday law and we just go, boom, put it here like this, right? Okay? Everybody follow. So here we have in the middle of it now, a time of peace, right? So, let's go to this next quote. Now remember, Millerite history from 1798 to 1844 was 46 years, right? What's the 46 a symbol of? Yes, the building of God's house, right? His people. Okay? So let's go to this next quote from Pamphlets 120. It says, evidences are multiplying on every hand that the plan of salvation is about to close. Great power is to attend it in its closing work. While the work of salvation is closing, trouble will be coming on the earth, and the nations will be angry, yet held in check, so as not to prevent the work of the third angel. At that time, the latter rain, or refreshing from the presence of the Lord, will come to give power to the loud voice of the third angel. Right? Yes. Now this is the very first quote I think we began with on Monday. Right? It's marking, the Sunday law comes, the nations are angry, yet they're held in check so as not to prevent the work of the third angel. Right? Yes. So they take that quote, but remember, this is the time of the end, right? The Sunday law. But what is this also? The time of the end, right? God demonstrates the end by the beginning. You have the angel of Revelation 18 coming down here. Do we have the angel of Revelation 18 coming down here? Yes, right? There's 2 temple cleansings. So let's go to the next paragraph. It says, over 60 years ago, in referring to the recent European conflict in a special testimony. So they're talking about now 60 years previous from their time they're at, and they refer back to a quote that she was quoting about the time that they've just passed through, right? And they're living in a time period just after the First World War, right? She died in which year? 1915, right? And the First World War began in 1914. So just as soon as it began, pretty much she died, right? And it's just after the First World War they're in now, and they're talking about how she predicted this time period, right? So she says, they say, over 60 years ago, referring to the recent European conflict, the First World War, In his special testimony, Sister White said, I saw Europe just as things were moving to accomplish their desire. There would seemingly be a slackening up once or twice. Thus the hearts of the wicked would be relieved and hardened. But the work would not settle down, only seem to. How would it stop? It would just be a seeming slackening up, right? For the minds of kings and rulers were intent upon overthrowing each other, and the minds of the people to get the ascendancy. So the 10 kings is a confederacy, right? But what does it say about the 10 kings in Daniel chapter 2? Go to Daniel 2. Verse 41. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. What shall it be? Divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with miry clay. Right? So it's talking about two different things there, right? So verse 43 again, it says, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. So iron is representing what? The state power, right? And the miry clay is a representation of what? What sort of church? Miry is dirty, right? It's an impure church. So the iron and the miry clay is this combination of church and state, right? They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Who's they?
The kings.
Sorry? Yes, I guess it is marked with the 10 kings. Well, the point I was meaning is just church and state, right? But I would agree it's the 10 kings, right? Because the 10 kings give the power to the woman, right? So it says, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Okay, so they, the 10 kings and the woman, are going to mingle themselves with who? Yeah, the seed of men. But who's the seed of men? You're guessing again, right? Who are the seed of men? Where do we find the seed of men? In Genesis, right? So just keep your place there. Go to Genesis chapter 6. Okay, verse 1. It says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. The daughters were born unto who? Men. Right? Now it says that let God be true and every man a liar. Right? So when you become God's people, what are you? According to Daniel 2. Gods. You're not men anymore. Because all men are liars, and all liars are going to have their place in the lake of fire, right? You're these gods with the small g. You're the church in heaven, right? So these daughters were born to men, sinners, right? That the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair. Who are the sons of God? The gods with the G, right? were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So what was the great sin here? The mingling of the seeds. The holy seed mingling with the worldly seed. Right? And the seed is also the truth. So when you mingle truth with error, it's the mystery of iniquity. So when you marry an ungodly person, what is it? The mystery of iniquity. So why the Lord says, don't do it. Can two walk together, lest they be agreed? So what has to be in agreement? The mind. Right? Two minds. If your other half, your wife or your husband, is not agreeing with what you agree, how can you walk together? Because God says to do this, but your husband or your wife will say, no, let's do this. Right? I don't agree. Right? So when they're not guided by the Spirit of God, what will it end up? Division, separation, right? When Christ came, he says, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. And what would happen to the families? Separation, right? Okay. So all this garbage that people try to spurn off, that Christ brings everybody together in love, right? It's complete garbage, right? It's true, he does bring everybody together in love, but so few people accept it, right, that most people will rise up against it, and it will cause division, right? Not Christ causing division. Who causes the division? Those that rise up against it, right? Satan's agents, right? So, when you go back to Daniel chapter 2, the iron and the miry clay come together, and it says they're going to mingle themselves with the seed of men. So, who's the seed of men? It's the rest of the world, right? Just keep your place there, and I'll show you this. Just go to Revelation, because they're the same book, right? Go to Revelation 16. Verse 13. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. What do we have? Sorry? If we parallel this with Daniel, what do we have? Yes, the iron and the clay, right? And look what they do. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So who's the seed of men? The whole world, right? Kings of the earth, the threefold union, right, are going to go to the whole earth, right, and deceive them. Okay? So when you go back to Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, it says, And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. But they, the threefold union, shall not cleave one to another. They meaning the seed of men and the iron and the clay, they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Right? Because church and state will not work, right? Christ has told us, right? So he's saying neither will this going to all these other people. It will not work, right? Okay, so they come together based upon a common enemy, but it says it's going to be broken up. It will not stick. This kingdom will not last, right? So it only come together for a short period, right? So, okay. Try to remember why we went there now. Doesn't matter, I'll come back to me in a minute. Go back to the quote from Pamphlets 120. And go to the second paragraph. It says, probably to this little time of seeming peace, the statement in volume 1, page 268 refers. There seemed to be a little time of peace. This time of apparent peace is followed by the final world conflict. Okay, now I want you to understand, right? When you come, prophetically speaking, right, in the Sunday law, let's just take the Sunday law, right? The test begins here, right? And the final test begins here. Right? Because, how do you explain this? Job was tested 2 times. What were the 2 times he was tested on? Yes, all his worldly goods, right? Everything that was dear to him in the world. And then his own life also, right? And if you I'll just remind you, go to Luke 14:26. It's important to see this. Remember this. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, 6 things, yeah? And his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. 7 things, right? So first of all the things that are dear to you in this earth, they cannot come before Christ, right? Amen? That's why Christ said when he brings the truth, families will be divided, because people will understand this and they will choose to follow Christ over and above their parents. Are we to obey our parents? Okay, but when your parents tell you to break a godly commandment, are you to obey your parents? No. Are you to suffer the consequences? Yes, right? And by doing so, you glorify God, right? So you're not to fear what man can do to you, but rather fear what God can do, right? Yes. Okay, so when we go back to this quote, probably to this little time of seeming peace, the statement in volume 1, page 268 refers. There seemed to be a little time of peace. This time of apparent peace is followed by the final world conflict. Sister White, in referring to it, said, once more, the inhabitants of the earth were presented before me, and again everything was in the utmost confusion. Strife, war, and bloodshed, with famine and pestilence raged everywhere. Then men's hearts failed them for fear, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth. When peace was declared in Europe, men were still hopeful through a League of Nations to bring about the reign of peace. So at the end of the First World War, they made a League of Nations, right, to hold peace. But as the final conflict opens, all hope is given up. Their hearts will then fail them for fear, right? Now, what I want us to understand is that, let me go from here. So the point that I'm making is that when you come here, this would be the final world conflict. It's under the 4th, right? So I want us to see this, right? So what I'm saying is, here's the Sunday law, right? And you have the First World War, and they're saying there's a little time of peace, and then it's going to come the final world conflict. So what was the final world conflict in type? World War II. What was the difference between World War II and World War I?
They killed a lot of Christians in World War II.
Christians? I mean, sure they did kill Christians, but that's not a subject of Bible prophecy then. Who did they kill during World War II? Jews. 6 million of them, right? Okay, and it says, he is not a Jew that is one outwardly, but he is a Jew that's one inwardly. What had the Jews, the literal Jews, done? They had rejected him, right? They said, let his blood be upon us. So what happened? It was fulfilled, right? His blood came upon them, right? And they died, and it was terrible. And it's an illustration of what's going to happen to Seventh-day Adventists who reject the message, right? Because you reject the message, there's nothing more to save you, right? So the First World War was from 1914 to 1918, right? 4 years it lasted. The Second World War was from 1939 to 1945. It was how many years? 6 years, right? What do we have? Right, so this one here, from 1798 to 1844, is how many years? 46 years. So what do you have? You have a fractal, right? You have a repeating pattern, right? So you have 2 times the trouble with the time of peace, 2 times the trouble, time of peace. Represented by the 46. It's the rebuilding of the temple, right? Okay, so when we go back now, let's go first back to Daniel 7 and confirm this point. We'll place Daniel 7 in here first, right? So, Daniel sees a vision, and he sees these 4 beasts coming up out of the sea, right? And those 4 beasts are the same 4 beasts that John saw in Revelation 13, right? But John is standing in 1798, and he sees them backwards, right? So, he's at the time of the dragon at the end. Who does he see next? Just hold your place there. Go to Revelation 13. This is a nice confirmation that John's standing in 1798, right? Verse 2. The beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Who's that? Greece. And his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth is the mouth of a lion. So how's he seeing them? Backwards, right? So he's 1798. He's at the time of the dragon, right? Because the dragon is pagan Rome, right? And he's just at the point where he gets a deadly wound. Because verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. That's 1798. So he's standing in 1790, he's looking back, and he sees, he's at the time of the dragon. Next one he sees Greece, then he sees Middle Persia, then he sees Babylon, right? It's exactly the same as Revelation 17. He's standing in 1790, he takes him back into the 1260. Right? Maybe it's been a long day, right? Okay, so here will be 1798, and it's the time when it gets a deadly wound. Now remember, pagan and papal, right? So the pagan element rises up here, right? Pagan Rome comes up like a lamb. Then it speaks like a dragon. Pagan Rome says in Revelation 12 was the dragon, right? So okay, so I need us to see that illustration because, okay, let's just put that in place. So let's go back to the beginning here, right? So 4 winds are here. And coming out of the sea here, you have the lion, first one, then you have the bear, then you have the leopard, and we'll come back to I'm saying there's a time of peace, and then you have this fourth kingdom. And the fourth kingdom is both pagan and papal Rome, right? So pagan Rome, just like the United States, rises like a lamb. And then it's going to speak like a dragon because it became a dictatorship, right?
Yes.
And it's a parallel because this point right here is the Great Tribulation mapped in Matthew 24, right? The Great Tribulation was for how long? 1260. That's the time of the papacy, right? So what you have people, right? And this is the fourth beast. Everybody see that? So the fourth beast, according to Daniel 7, if you just come down, verse 7, after this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Right? So we'll look at that in a moment, right? So before the little horn comes up, how many horns are plucked up? 3, right? So this is here, the papacy is the little horn. Is this another little horn, right? But pagan Rome, according to Daniel 8, is also what? Little horn. But this little horn comes up peacefully, speaks like a dragon here, and then unites with this little horn. So what do you now have? What sort of kingdom do you have? A two-horned beast, right? Everybody follow? Yeah. Right? And the two-horned beast is the one that makes a Sunday law, right? So it begins with the United States, and then it's going to come down to the papacy, right? So now go to Daniel 8, and we'll see this in greater detail. Now when you start in Daniel 8, it starts with a two-horned power, right? So the two-horned power, it's then followed by this Greek horn, right? This one horn. So Greece is here, and let's just take this two horns, right? One horn's higher than the other, right? So right. So what do we see parallel then? We take Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 and parallel, what do we see? Just with that little bit here. What do we see here? The lion and the bear is sort of linked with this two-horned power, right? Because in Daniel 7, it starts with Babylon, the lion, then the bear, but when you get to Daniel 8, it just has these two horns, right? So if this was correct, the Bible must prove it to us, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Brother Isaac? Okay, let's go to 1 Samuel, chapter 17. And this is the story of David and Goliath, right?
Yes.
And David and Goliath is our story, right?
Yes.
Because who is Goliath? This is Goliath, right?
Yes.
Remember when the spies went into the land? What was it they saw? Giants. They saw Goliath, right? They were frightened of Goliath. And Goliath is just symbolized by this statue here, right? So David comes along and Goliath is given all these pretend Christians a hard time. But David had faith, right? This is the difference, right? So, verse 31. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. What were their hearts not to do? Not to fail. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. What came? A lion and a bear. And I went out after him. Who's the him?
Lamb.
The lion and the bear, right? And smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. So the lion and the bear is which king? Is what is it? It's one kingdom, right? God's thoughts are not our thoughts, right? Okay. And just when you read on, it says, verse 36, thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Goliath, what was he made of? Brass and iron. So what do you now have? You're going where? I'm not sure I agree with that. But there's 4 parts to the statue. What's the first part? Gold. It's the lion, right? And the bear was the silver, right? So he says, the Lord had delivered me out of the hand of the lion and the bear. And here's this Philistine, and he's made from what? Brass and iron, right? Now, I don't know that I have the answer. I've not worked this part out yet. But it's like halfway down that kingdom, right? He's already been delivered from the first part, and now he's got to deal with this brass and this iron, right? Okay. So we can't. Let's just say we can't put our own interpretation onto that, right? So I don't need to go into that at the moment. But I just want you to see, the point I want you to see is that the lion and the bear is the same as the two-horned power, right? Okay? Okay, so that brings Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 together, right? And now, just based upon that, we are in a time, right? We are in this 2014 down to the civil Sunday law, right? And we are in this half, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, if you have to take this, you can make another fractal. You could do the same again, what you did with this, right? You can take one, bring it down here. You can also do the same here. Where would be the time of peace? Yeah, just exactly the same. It would be there, right? You split down again, right? Okay. So, but nonetheless, so this would be the lion and the bear and the two horns is one kingdom. The leopard is another kingdom. Right? Okay, and that's what we have to see, because our time period typified this. So something's going to happen. If we go to Daniel 8, right? Okay, so Verse 3. Daniel 8 and verse 3. Okay, so it says, Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. It's the Sunday law crisis, right? The 2-horned beast makes the Sunday law. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. What does it mean he becomes great? Sorry? Yes, it's self-exaltation, right? And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So, and this is, therefore the he-goat waxed very great. So what's now happening? The he-goat is exalting himself greater than the first one, right? It's just the same as you see this gold and silver and bronze, right? They get harder and harder. They get more self-exalted rather than humble, right? It's the opposite. Okay, so now I'm absolutely positive we need to go back and look at this closer, because I still don't think we understand this perfectly, right? But when you come down to go to verse 8, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. Now, so what I want you to see is that you have here this ram followed by this great horn, the leopard. And when this horn becomes very great, is right at that point it gets broken, right? So, who do we understand those 2 horns and this great horn represent in our time? Trump and Biden, right? The North and the South. These 2 opposing doctrines, right? So, and what we understand is that this is this northern power, this combination of church and state that rises itself up, and then you come to a period where this great horn, this Greek horn, right? And Greek is also a symbol of the world, right? And you have these 2 opposing thoughts. You have this communist and this fascism, right? There's these 2 powers that are constantly opposing each other. And that's what you see going on in America, but it's not the focus right now, because it's a different focus at the moment. But we went through a period where this was a great focus, right? And we were trying to understand this point. So we understand that Trump was sort of symbolized here as in this time, and then Biden came along and stamped him under his feet. But we know that Biden is soon to be brought down, right? And Biden is going to be brought down at midnight. So if I just rub this out here, because on Sunday, my last time that I will present, I will deal with this ongoing crisis at the moment, and I was asking you, where would the time of peace be? I'll just put it in here just so we can visualize it. That right now in our time period from 2014 to midnight, we are right before this little time of peace, right? And what always ends at a time of peace? Or should I say, what always, not ends, what always begins when the time of peace comes? Come on, you just go to the time of peace. What's beginning here? Yes, right? So, what's the point I'm trying to make? Let's say it another way. We're talking about this morning. What's happening here? Judgment, right? So there's a judgment got to happen that's going to bring about the time of peace, right?
Yes.
And always at the time of peace, both in this one, you have this republic rising up. And the republic is more right-wing, right? It's more conservative. It believes in law and order, whereas the other one, is it went to law and order and all these sorts of things? No. Okay, just look at Biden in America. What's with their southern border? It's chaos. There's thousands of people flooding into their country and they don't care about it, right? It's bringing in crime, chaos, overinflation. Their country, their economy has never been so bad. What was it like under Trump? That border was sealed up, right? The economy was the greatest it's been in years, right? Let's go back, he lists always all his great feats that he did, right? And it was amazing, right? But we shouldn't be amazed because God says, right, that Babylon was the Lord that gave him this power, right? And made him great. And this is what we understand, the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. Who had that slogan before him? Adolf Hitler, right? I will make Germany great again. And when did he make that pronouncement? After the First World War, right? So Adolf Hitler was a corporal, an Austrian in the Bohemian Army in the First World War, and he was so disgruntled by what happened after that, in the time of peace, he started to organize this movement and he got to power. His slogan in his party was, "We'll make Germany great again." And did he do that? Yes, it was booming, right? It was just amazing. But obviously God is in control of those things, right? So history is going to repeat itself, right? So anyway, we see this, Trump followed by Biden, right? But in Daniel 11, what happens? The south comes against the north, and then the north retaliates, right? So we know that it's this ongoing thing all the way down to the end, right? So it says they shall not cleave. They're constantly warring against each other, right? So, okay, that's that point. Yes. So, if we were to take this and spread it out like this would be parallel with this. So what would then happen at the end of this? There would be a judgment, right? And that's what we're going to cover on Sunday, to show you this ongoing conflict in the moment is typifying this, right? And we'll show you how that's going to be brought to an end in the next coming short period. I'm not going to put days or maybe a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months. It might go on longer. It might be shorter. I don't know. But it's coming, right? And it's right there. And we will lay all this stuff out for that. So that's where we are, right? And when this all gets brought down, you have, it says, verse 8, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. What do the 4 winds represent? No, not always. When the 4 winds are blowing, it represents that. It's the world. It's the 4 corners of the world, right? And on the altar of incense, what's on all 4 corners? Horns, right? So the horns, for instance, if you go to, I think it says it in there, go to Revelation 9. Okay, verse 13. And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God. So there's the golden altar, right? But this is the one in the holy place, right? Why? Because it's golden. The one in the courtyard was brass, right? And and the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God. So who's standing there at the golden altar? Christ. He's the high priest, right? And it says, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates, and the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men, right? So the 4 winds are linked to those 4 horns there, right? Because he's standing by the golden altar which had 4 horns. And when Christ holds the 4 winds, what does he say? My blood, my blood, my blood, my blood. Where does he put his blood? On the horns, right? Okay, you see that point?
Yes.
So the 4 winds are held. It's marking all the worldly kingdoms being held in check, right? When the 4 winds are loose, it means that they're allowed to do whatever the Lord allows them to do, right? And the time of peace is marking a time where those 4 horns are held, right? You'll see it in a moment, the pioneers, that, Ellen White used this thing that the nations are held in check so as not to prevent the work of the 3rd angel. These early Adventists used the same quote and put it at the end, right? I'll show you that in a moment. And at 9/11, do we always understand that the 4 winds were held? Yes, right? To allow the work to go forward. So right here, when that great horn is brought down, it marks these 4 horns there. And 4 horns are a symbol of the whole world. So the League of Nations, what was the League of Nations? No. You're not listening to my question. What was the League of Nations? We're talking about the League of Nations. What was it? Yes, it's a world nations coming together to make sure that there's no more war, right? Okay, so you have this illustration in the Sunday law is the First World War, so what should be here? A League of Nations, a worldwide entity. And when that Greek horn gets brought down, what do we see? 4 horns, right? And I want to put it to you that that's an illustration of this League of Nations, right? But what eventually happens to that league? The League of Nations, did it really function? No, it was useless, right? And in history, these 4 horns, what happened to them? They got split up and they eventually became who? 2, the north and the south, and they start warring against each other again, right? So it's just a repeating cycle, right? So it starts off, and they get to this point, right? Because I'm saying to you, what's happening at the moment in Russia and Ukraine? The terrible war. So when the judgment comes at the end, what's going to come? Yes, they're going to make a league. Right, we're going to see this. They're going to make a league to prevent any time a war coming like that again, right? Is it all good intended? Did they really mean it? Yeah, they mean it, right? They always start off well intended, right? Okay, but let's look in Daniel 8 what happens. Because it just jumps immediately to verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. Who is this? Don't guess, right? It's not the papacy. Who is it? Pagan Rome, right? Papacy comes after pagan Rome because the horn was Greece, right? Then it's followed by pagan Rome, right? So pagan Rome, this little horn, that's why I put it there, this little horn rises paralleling the United States rising there because they're just parallel histories, right?
Yes.
So he rises there. And then he's going to, in our history, he'll prefigure the Sunday law here, or prefigure this, not the Sunday law, the Great Tribulation here. So after we get past this point, and then we come to the vaccination test, because it's Biden, he's the one that's pushing the vaccination, right? When America gets a cold, the whole world sneezes, right? It's the truth, right? So Biden is the one pushing the vaccination. So Biden is the one that's going to be responsible. He will get the punishment for that persecution, right? Putin is the one that's causing the trouble at the moment. He will be the one that will get brought down here. So we'll deal with those different things, right? Putin is the king of the... No, wrong answer, right? Okay, he's the king of the north, right? I've had this out. What is here? Who is this? The north, right? Now we're getting it, right? So, this is speaking about Putin getting this punishment here, right?
Yes.
And then it will deal with Biden bringing us down to midnight and the raising up of John. Now that's all in a fractal, right? Because if we were to just follow this through by this pattern, right? This was 2016, there was 2020, right? But then we brought the fractal gets down and brought here again, and he's now taking us through it in real-time order, right? So we have to look at it from the smaller fractal and place it on top to understand this, right? Okay, and by God's grace, Lawrence will show that. Okay, so I want us to see from prophecy where we are today, right? It's easy to see it that, I mean, let's just, for the argument's sake, let's draw this smaller fractal here. So, goes like, that's this repeating for us, right? This is what Lawrence went through the other day. Because when we got here in 2020, we were not converted. The Lord couldn't bring any of these things to pass because we didn't understand it, right? But when we get here, He starts opening up, and we're brought back prophetically to the beginning again, and He takes us down through it. We're just before here, right? Then we're going to have the vaccination test, and it'll bring us to there, where this horn will get brought down, and that league will get made. That's what we've been going through, right? And the problem is that the Lord, He wants to come, right? But he can't come when we're not ready, because we must give a prediction, right? Remember 10 days before what's given? Prediction. The Lord is raising up a people to tell the world what's coming before it comes to pass. If we don't do that, he can't come, right? He has ordained it that way, and if we don't do it, he'll pass us by and raise somebody else up to do it. Okay? And believe me, when you do that, you're going to get a hard time for doing that. But nonetheless, that's part of our purifying process that we have to go through. So, back to verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great towards the south, toward the east, towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and it prospered. Then I heard one saint speak, and another saint said, that said, saying, How long shall be the vision concern the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? Right? So ask this question about the daily and the papacy. Right? These two powers. The daily being paganism and this papal power. From the beginning, these pagan powers, and then you have the papacy. Before the papacy can come up, how many horns must be taken? 3. So how many horns do you have here? Right, so these have to be moved out of the way, right, in order for the papacy to come up, right? This another little horn, right? That's found in Daniel chapter 7. But before another little horn can come up, you must have the little horn rising up in a time of peace, speaking like a dragon, just like the United States is going to do here, right? So, I'm not claiming that we have a perfect understanding of these chapters, because there's been a lot of things that we've come to understand since we last really went over these deeply. And whenever those things happen, we always go back and look at it closer, and we see things that we might not have seen before. But I want to pray that by God's grace, you can see that the books of Daniel and Revelation, right, they're one book. They're all speaking about the Sunday law. And you can go through Daniel 1 all the way to 10, and you can place them all perfectly in the Sunday law crisis. Okay? So, but we haven't got time to do that. But I just wanted you to see how the structure confirms these things, right? And how these repeating patterns are being illustrated by in these repeating patterns, right? So there's so much I could go into, but we haven't got time, right? So have we got any last thoughts before we close? And then we will come back for question time. No points just now? No? Okay, let's take a break, and then we come back and we can go through any points that need ironing out or understanding better. Okay, let's close with a... Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to thank you for these sublime truths. And I want to pray that you would help us to really spend much time in the books of Daniel and Revelation, and help us to understand them, that we can look very closely at these things and how they are being prefigured in our time as the events come to pass before our eyes, that we can know where we are, at least in type, what's happening and where we should see ourselves on the line. And I want to pray that you'll give us much grace to finish off these last few days and give much evidence to these tests that lie before us. And I just want to thank you for the privilege of being able to share these things, and I pray that many people here would be blessed by them. And I pray that you'll help them to think upon any points that they might need to be verified or have a better understanding of as we take a break. And I just want to thank you and ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.